Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Nic and I discuss the Appalachian Trail. We talk to Francis O'Shea about project management, the Appalachian Trail, and trust for public land. And finally, speaking of the AT, the youngest person to hike the entire 2,190-mile trail, depending how you count it, was a 1-year-old girl carried by her parents. And there have been several 5-year-olds to complete the path with their families. The oldest person to through hike the trail is a man named Nimble Nomad, who completed the path as an 83-year-old.
Yeah. How about that?
I got to get going on this thing.
I know, right? So yeah, no excuses for us.
Right? Hit that music.
The annual NAEP Conference and Training Symposium will occur from Sunday, May 5th to Wednesday, May 8th at the Renaissance Minneapolis Hotel in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's always a great time and will feature many of your favorite planning sessions with regional flair. Register at www.naep.org.
All right. Well, we do not have a sponsor going for us today, so we would love to hear from you if you'd like to fill this spot. But for the time being, we've got 30 seconds of Nic selling us something fun. Ready?
Yeah, here we go. Laura, many of us, most of us I would say, maybe we're a little follically challenged, right? Maybe we don't have all the hair on our heads. And I'm not trying to single anyone out. I don't know who I would be talking about, but I have a product for you. If you're tired of being bald and you would like to not be bald, we have a thing called Hats for Life. That's right. We're going to sew a hat onto your head so you always have one at all times. And even when people think you can take it off or should take it off, you can't. So how about that? Hats for Life. We're going to make sure that no one ever looks at the top of your head instead of your eyes. Because that happens, and I'm down here. That's all I'm saying. We collectively are down here. That's what I meant. Yeah, definitely not referring to myself. That would be ridiculous. Hats for Life.
I think you might have gone over a little bit when you went on the end, right. But otherwise pretty close.
Let's get to our segment. I would love to talk about the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, yeah.
So
I think that's perfect. I mean, I think it's kind of surprising that I've never done it.
I know. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, what on earth? I mean, I know it doesn't go to Florida, but still, I figured everyone on the East Coast has at least been on it a little.
I don't think I've even looked at it that I know of. I mean, we used to camp and go to all kinds of places in North Carolina, Tennessee, even maybe Virginia when I was younger. Mm-hmm. But we weren't hiking; we were just camping.
Yeah.
So I think we went to touristy places. I don't think we went to something like that.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think honestly, that's the joy of the trail is that there's lots of different ways to experience it, and none of them are wrong. They're all just unique ways. You can hike the entire thing. You can hike segments. You can go on an hour-long hike or a 6-month hike, or I think that's how long it takes, 4 months, something like that, to go start to finish. And I think that's the joy of it. I mean, I'm so biased. I grew up there and it was like when you're a teenager and there's literally nothing else to do, you're like, yeah, let's go hiking again, and it's just kind of, my love of the environment, it comes from the trail. So yeah, I can't help but gush.
Back to I am from Florida. Uh-huh. We don't have any hills.
No, I know.
but there's a short period of my life where we did do backpacking. I have multi-day backpacked handful of times.
In Florida?
In Florida.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, sometimes great, sometimes brutal, because you can never weather's going to be good or if it's going to be painfully hot and humid. Mm-hmm. But I've also done it in the Olympic National Forest, but I don't think I've ever done anything as arduous as the Appalachian Trail, nor would I think I would even try.
Right. And, it's like I say, there's the PCT in the West Coast. There's so many different kinds of trails like that. And so it's not even I think that's just a different kind of experience. I was like, my best friend and I, we were like, if we don't have jobs in 6 months, we're going to hike the trail for the year and the rest of the year. And we both got jobs a week after we said that. Yeah. But it was a dream of mine when I was younger, when I was in my 20s. I don't have any desire to do it now, but walking for a day or two, heck yeah. It's still wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I'm at the point now where I wonder if I could backpack again, because for 10 years, I had such back problems, they could not even have considered it. But now I'm I don't know. I think I'm kind of back to normal, but I also wouldn't want to push it. There's no way I want to back to that. So I'm
yeah.
I think those days, maybe with a burro.
The mule that was at the
Yeah, exactly.
in the
If I
store.
could
Yeah,
borrow
yeah.
the mule,
Yeah, Willie. That was his
clearly
name.
they're out
Yeah.
there somewhere,
Yeah, yeah.
and maybe that's where it came from, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. Oh, that's too funny.
There's also this thing of people hiking with goats. So if I could get a mule or a goat or something to carry my stuff, I might do
Or
it.
just carry me and just drag me behind. I'll just be behind it. Just won't even get on the horse. Yeah. No, I think it's like so. Like Peak Savada is like where that was the closest like touristy place to where I grew up. Right. It was like literally 35 minutes or so from my house, and like you just go down there. There's no internet anywhere, and at least there wasn't last time I did it. It's still kind of funny. Like it's just like they had a TV, and that was it, pretty much, like a TV. But that's at the base of the mountain, and they're not tall. They're like 4,000 feet, sharp top and flat top. Flat top is an easy 4-mile hike. Sharp top is a straight up vertical, 1-mile hike. So they're very different, but they're very fun. And like I did that thing so many times as a kid, and I've forgotten how hard it was. Because as a kid, like nothing's hard. You're like, oh, this is so easy. I have all the energy in the world. And then as an adult, you're like, I'm dying to get to the top of this thing. And but the view is beautiful. It really is. It's a great, great view. So it's always like, that's the joy, right? You could do that right now and you'd have no problems. I mean, you would be annoyed with me because you said it'd be easy, Nic.
Right.
But you could do it, and you could do it in a day.
I pretty much do. I'll do it. Just, I have to take my time, right? Like if I don't stop, I stop.
No rush.
Like I have to keep up or whatever, but I don't even try.
No. And like I say, like there's going to be 5-year-olds flying past you on that trail all the time. So yeah, I don't know. It's the beauty of something like that. It's even like North Carolina, it's more driving. I've driven more than I've hiked in North Carolina, but it's also still very beautiful. It's a winding road through the mountains. It's hard not to.
Oh, wait, so you can drive the Appalachian Trail?
Well, the Blue Ridge Parkway is actually close to it.
Okay.
So like, I'm sorry, I should have said that right away. So like Blue Ridge Parkway is actually follows it for a bit.
I've done that.
Yeah. And so there's lots of different ways to get to different parts of it. And like, I think that's where you see those intersections of those kinds of things. And so if you can't hike it, you can still drive for parts of the Blue Ridge Parkway or for the Blue Ridge Parkway. And it does basically follow the trail. So it's pretty cool. It's a really neat experience. So that's what I mean. Like there's lots of different ways that you can still experience how pretty it is. Yeah.
Well, like this author and his brother that I mentioned later who hiked the trail in their 70s. They did do, I checked with my business partner. They did the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
In their 70s.
I mean, that's intense. That is, how long did it take them? Do you know? It's months. It's months long for anyone. So yeah.
But the book will be out later this year. So we can all know. And they're going to do like in September, they're going to do like a reunion. It's been 5 years. So they're going to go back and do a little, not the whole thing, like a couple day reunion trip. So that'll be really cool. But yeah, I'm like, but that makes me feel like such a wimp, right? I'm like, I have this book now and I'm reading the story and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I could do it. I'm like, oh man, no, maybe I should. But then how do we do a weekly podcast while you're hiking the trail for 6 months?
Exactly. But you can totally do it. I'm sure that there's like, the trail also has lots of spots where it intersects with lots of different things. So I think it intersects with the Blue Ridge Parkway a couple of times, but they run parallel to each other. But there's lots of intersections. So there's lots of ways that people hike the trail. Because I looked into this like years ago. And like you do it, there's like towns even that the trail intersects. So you can get like a meal or a shower or something if you need it. And that does have internet. So
okay, cool. So it sounds like maybe every couple of days you could.
Yeah, you could record whenever and then upload to when you get to a spot that has it. Although, I mean, I don't know. It's been, I'm assuming almost everything is a lot more connected than it used to be. So I'm sure that's much easier now than it was. But yeah, I mean, I could talk about it all day long. All right. I don't want to bore everyone to tears. So let's get to our interview. Hello and welcome back to EPR. Today we have Francis O'Shea, the Conservation Project Manager at Trust for Public Land on the show. Welcome, Francis.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, so you began your career at Skidmore College, you had a degree in poli-science, and then you went into real estate. So of course you're on the Environmental Professionals Radio. So how do we go from where you started in your career to where you are now?
Oh, it was a long and winding road, Laura and Nic. Thank you again for having me. It's really fun to be a part of this and to be talking about my journey here. Where do I start? I was very fortunate as a child to be able to be in the outdoors a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So while I never got any formal environmental training, I was always interested in the sciences. And I was fortunate enough to learn a lot about climate change in the 90s before it became quite as maybe in the collective consciousness as it is now, right? But to answer your question simply, I woke up one day once I had kids and realized that I wasn't happy selling stuff for a living. And I wanted to try to find something where I could utilize my skills and my experience while addressing climate change and working in the mission-based space. And so that led me to quit my old job. And I spent almost 2 years looking back. I think it was about 18 months from the time I left my real estate brokerage job until I landed the gig at TPL, at Trust for Public Land, where I work now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of casting about to try to match my experience with what I wanted to do, which was difficult in retrospect. And I think I'm very happy to have done it. But yeah, it was a circuitous route. I don't think that I would have envisioned myself here there, but it's turned out really great and been a really fun journey.
Yeah. And so were there times in that process that were difficult? I'm sure that, 18 months sounds like a long time to be hunting for something. What kept you going?
Yeah. That's a good question. It was definitely stressful. I was lucky in my old career to be making pretty good money. So I was fortunate enough to be able to take time off to do it, which I know a lot of people can't. My wife also works and has a career. We just had our second baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there were definitely some long nights. I credit my wife with giving me the time and the space to be stressed out by myself rather than being stressed out by her.
Right.
I think it was really hard to find, and I still don't think that this has happened. It was hard to find a way to match what I knew I could do well with what opportunities were out there, because I think that resumes in the nonprofit space speak a different language maybe than those in the sales and for-profit space.
Yeah.
And I think for people listening to this that are thinking about it maybe earlier in their journey, in their life journey, it's a good idea to pick up some of the harder skills and education to come into this space. It's hard to say when you're 18 or 20, I might be into this, so I should do that. Right. But not having a master's degree, not having environmental science or law background for my specific role, which we can talk more about as we chat, was definitely a hindrance for me. On the other hand, what I do as a conservation project manager, which is sourcing real estate deals, securing contracts on property, raising public funds to buy those properties from the private owners and convey them to our public partners for for permanent ownership and access by the public. Those are skills that you mostly gain from working in real estate. So in that sense, I was in a good place, So on the other side, for people that are maybe in a more traditional role and thinking about, oh my God, how am I going to ever get past the fact that I don't have an environmental science degree? If you're willing, or if you want to be in a space like this where you're doing project work, it's good to just have been working, So it's sort of a double-edged sword. But I think it was the hardest moments, to answer your question again, are just were realizing that I hadn't spent the time 10 years before doing things that I knew at the time were interesting or could be cool. Specifically some hard science, geology and or environmental science. And then just learning how to speak the language, of people that were already in this, in the nonprofit space, that is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. It is. As a career coach, I'm talking to people all the time about how do I get this job, and I haven't got the experience. I don't have the traditional courses. So, I'm always telling them that it's a lot about networking and standing out, in addition to filling any gaps that you might have if there's key requirements or something for the job. I'm sending people to talk about NEPA. And
got it.
But for you, what was the key for you to being able to go from the non-traditional background to landing the job at the...
Sure. At Trust for Public Land. I didn't know anything about it. I'm sure that my marketing and my team will be it's a backhanded compliment, but things have gotten better at TPL since I got here, for sure, about, what's the term, taking your light out from under the bushel. People know about us more, but it's always a challenge for us, right? We're one of the biggest national nonprofits in the space. We raise over $100 million a year. We've done over 5,000 projects across the country and raised $94 billion for public funding of open space around the country. It's a pretty remarkable track record and unique, really. But first is educating yourself. Now, it's not exactly answering your question, but you need to know, if you're coming into it, what are the real opportunities? If I had known about the project manager opening at TPL earlier in my process, that 18 months wouldn't have been as long.
Right.
But the key for me was networking. It was taking time every single day to volunteer for every group that seemed vaguely interesting to me. I knew from the beginning, my first instinct was to go towards sustainable and regenerative agriculture. I happen to live outside New York City, and there's a place here called Stone Barns. There's a very famous restaurant called Blue Hill at Stone Barns, which you've probably heard of, started by Dan Barber. But it's attached to this amazing nonprofit run by a guy named Jack Algier and a couple others that does some amazing work in the sustainable agriculture space. And so I started volunteering there because I quit my job. Right. Yeah. And I was like, so I gave myself the time, and then I started talking to everybody I could about it. And it ended up being literally I think over a year later, as a result of a string of happenstance meetings and 8 o'clock, networking events it was recommended to me that I go to yet another conference called Bedford 2020, which is sort of a local offshoot of Al Gore's movement. Well, anyway, it's hard to explain everything there, but in short, it was just another event. And I ran right into the guy that would end up hiring me, Carter Strickland, our former state director.
That's amazing. I love that story.
Yeah.
One, it validates all of my career coaching.
Oh, there you go, Laura. Anything I can do to help.
There's a friend of mine. That's what we're here for, right? There's a friend of mine who teaches a networking class called The Strength of Loose Ties. And it's all about how the one little teeny thread is actually just going to lead you to the next one. And then you realize how they connect together until you look back. So that's amazing. And that's awesome. And congrats on making that switch. Sure. And how long have you been there now?
It'll be 6 years next month. So a good little while now. Yeah. I was working.
Tell us about all these amazing projects and, how long have they been around?
Sure. Yeah. So at the risk of starting to sound like I'm reading off of a placard, which I'm not exactly, TPL has been around since 1972, and it's a national nonprofit. We have offices all over the country, over 300 employees, and we like to see our work in the guise of climate equity and health, all under the umbrella of community work. So I'm a project manager that works in our land protection program. It's the oldest part of what TPL does, which is securing land for public use. So similar to Nature Conservancy in the sense that we're looking to do larger projects, but not always by acreage and not for the purpose of preserving ecosystems per se. Right. But we really feel like communities, no matter where they are, should have access to the outdoors. A statistic that we very often use, and I think it was in some of the materials I sent to you, is that something like 100 million people across the United States aren't within a 10-minute walk of a quality public space.
Wow. Yeah.
28 million of those people are children.
Yeah.
And so from the outset, TPL has been addressing that equity gap by doing on the ground work. It started in Oakland in the 70s. And I could talk about TPL's genesis for hours. It's a really cool story, and we can, but it's whether it's a public park in a city or preserving, 500,000 acres of forest land in Montana, which we've been a part of. There's a lot of ways to view this, right? And it's not always in an urban context or a rural context, but we're doing on the ground project work to make tangible results for the communities that we work with. But we also do a lot of policy support work, right? So conservation finance is another area that we've been involved in for a long time. And that's basically the process of helping governments raise public funds for the purpose of creating and maintaining open space, right? Yeah. So that's what you would call like a bond referendum. Here in New York last year, TPL was instrumental in, along with partners, of course, in raising a $4.2 billion bond that will be used to both, improve our infrastructure and do all sorts of boring and critically important stuff like making sure that our water, we can still drink our water, and all the way on to buying, raising money to actually purchase new public open space and new land. And another example that I'm really excited about right now, and this is more of a new thing, is that we're looking at our board chair, Lucas St. Clair, and a colleague of mine, Betsy Cook, and a bunch of other people here at TPL have been working to create a new national park around Mount Katahdin. It's over 32,000 acres. But these are all examples of projects that touch people's lives. Yeah. And I think that that's what I've come to learn. When I got here, I was like, oh, cool. I get to like expense going hiking, and I get to, like never be in the office unless I want to. And I get to do my thing and, still kind of do real estate, but get paid for it and not be always waiting for a commission. And I get to, brag to my friends that are finance bros about working in the nonprofit space, or not, or whatever. But I think that the thing that I've come to learn is that of course this is a much bigger story, right? And like really what it is, and I think it's said too much today by too many people because it's become very fashionable, but the center of everything that we do is the communities we work with.
Right.
And so no matter what project we're getting into, one of the first tests for us is whether it reflects the priorities of the folks that we're trying to help. Yeah. So it's our goal. We don't always do it perfectly, to ensure that anything we do is informed by the people that this work is going to affect the most, rather than just parachuting in and doing a project that sounds good and is going to help us raise money. Right. And not to say that that's like the norm. I think that it's really important for folks that are looking at TPL or maybe listening to me talking to see that like that really is authentically where we start and end our work and how we judge its success.
Yeah. So like, well, I mean, you've alluded to this a little bit, but so what is the day-to-day like for a project manager? Like what are the things you do on a day-to-day basis? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a really interesting job. It's a venerable job here at TPL. I mean, the organization's been around since 1972. So there's literally like generations of people that have been doing it. But a project manager's role is to manage project budgets, first of all, right? That's not a great answer, but my job is to protect land for people. So I work as a part of the state office, and we have 14 of them around the country. I've got an amazing group of people that support me. One of my bosses, Roger, is just texting me right now, actually making sure that I have what I need, but I'll get back to him later.
Right,
and my job is to find land that fits within our strategic plan, within our mission, right? Which is to protect land for people, essentially, right? Yeah. And to discover three things. One, to make sure that we have a willing seller, which means we have somebody that owns a piece of land, whether that be an easement or a property. It's usually a large forested piece of land traditionally, right? Let's just do a simple TPL project. And that wants to sell it, is willing to sell it, isn't being forced to sell it, isn't, right. So that's a whole fun, long story. I can tell a lot of real estate stories at some point. It would be fun to do, but we find a willing seller, we find a willing buyer, a willing holder, a willing long-term steward. So that's almost always either the state or the federal government or a municipality, like a city or a town or a village.
Yeah.
So they say, okay, yeah, if you could find the money, Fran, and you could find the land, yeah, we would take it. We'll own it forever, right?
Yeah.
And then a pathway to funding it, a way to raise public funds to buy it. Of course, we raise money every year. We're a philanthropic organization, but we seek to raise public funds to purchase these properties. It's part of our business model, but we also find it's important for the groups we're working with, the agent, the governments we're working with, to have skin in the game, to have a part of it, and it also helps, reflect the community's desires, right? So we're not just coming in and spending somebody else's money on a piece of land we think is important. We want to make sure that there's support at every government level for what we do. Mm-hmm. So those are the three things. We need a willing seller, we need a willing buyer, a willing long-term holder, and we need a pathway to funding. And then our job is to tie it up in a bow. So my job really is to find all those three things, think about all the money involved, talk to a bunch of people at TPL and outside of it to make sure that they have time and capacity and it's in line with what we do, while trying to keep the seller there, talking to him or her, right? Or them, right? And then coach everybody through that process, because very often it takes a really long time. For real estate professionals that are thinking about it's sort of like trying to pitch somebody on the worst possible real estate deal. It's going to be really slow. We might not get you as much money, right?
Right.
Right. I mean, that's kind of a joke, but it is a big part of it. It's managing people, it's managing processes. That's very much a project manager position in the sense that I think a lot of people would understand it, right? It's a collaborative process with a lot of parallel timelines. And I'll say one more thing, which is that at the end of the day, I think the project manager's fundamental role is to make sure that all of those things are being balanced, so that at the end we have a project that we can all be proud of at TPL. And so a lot of times you're making calls that are difficult for others to make because they don't know what you know. Right. But obviously you have to work with folks. So it's a lot of balancing and a lot of learning. It's a very interesting job in that regard. I hope that wasn't too long an answer or
no.
unclear.
It's almost like a puzzle. You're putting a puzzle together.
Absolutely.
You have a much better framework for how the puzzle's supposed to look than almost anybody else. But that's kind of interesting. It's almost like you're saying you're managing people is one of the most important things of your job. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. It's a sharp learning curve, but I'm lucky to have people that have taught me a lot. And it does feel like a puzzle. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of skills that can come into it. I will say this, especially for folks that are actually looking at my organization or a similar one, it's a very cool peer group. You get a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. And I don't want to say a lot of different motivations, because I think we're all in it for leaving a legacy for other people that come behind us, for making sure that future generations are able to enjoy what we are,
Yeah.
That's really where it is. But it's an eclectic and funny group of people that, you kind of have to have a little bit of an independent streak. I feel very humbled to be a part of it, really, honestly. I just was kind of a guy that said, hey, let me do something about climate change. And then found this like really esoteric, funny place where you can utilize a lot of the skills and learn a lot of new things too. It's cool.
That's awesome. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
So are there any particularly exciting, fun, or projects you're most proud of?
Well, yeah, I'm really excited about some new project work that I can't talk about yet because it's not under contract yet, that will involve cultural heritage sites here in New York State, involving the Seneca Nation, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just about to close, fingers crossed, until it actually closes. You never know, but we're just in the final throes of conveying just over 500 acres of land that we've been having to hold, buy, and own for a period of time to New York State along the Appalachian Trail in upstate New York. And that's been a multi-year, multi-million-dollar endeavor, and it required the support of some amazing people and donors and a lot of patience by a lot of people. We're calling that Depot Hill and Camp Lovington as our internal project name for it, but we should be closing on that in about a month. And so, yeah, that'll be really fun. I've been working on that almost since I got here, actually.
Oh, wow.
Not quite. The idea there is to, like, the Appalachian Trail. I don't know, for folks that maybe aren't familiar with it, but the Appalachian Trail is I think it's called the National Historic and Scenic Trail. I'm probably getting that wrong, and my colleague's going to yell at me after this, but it's a trail that goes all the way from Georgia to Maine. It ends at Mount Katahdin in Maine. But that corridor has been identified by scientists at Nature Conservancy and other groups as a really critical path for species as the climate continues to warm and change.
Yeah.
So at first we were just trying to conserve as many spots as we could, right? In the hopes that would be enough.
Right.
But it's become apparent more recently. And again, I'm sure many people listening to this podcast are like, duh, I learned that in college 20 years ago. But something that I just found out about is that what's even more important is to create corridors, pathways for conservation.
Yeah.
So the bigger we make that path, the more likely that more species will be able to use it to move upwards in elevation and northwards in latitude as climate changes, right?
Yeah.
And so the Appalachian Trail was started not for that reason at all. It was started in the 1920s, I think, originally. The idea for it was a place for people to be in the outdoors and to hike, right?
Yeah.
And obviously during the pandemic, we all got a big dose of how important it was to have a place to go outside and to be, right?
Yeah.
And so the Appalachian Trail is this amazing thing. It's in thousands of miles of this incredible natural wilderness in the middle of one of the densest population centers in the world.
Right. And it's beautiful.
And so, oh my God. Have you guys ever hiked it? Have you ever been on it?
I grew up near there. I grew up like maybe 35, 40 minutes away.
Oh, whereabouts?
In Virginia, in central Virginia.
Nice.
So,
beautiful. Yeah.
It's still to this day a soft spot in my heart.
Cool. That's so great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So we have, one of my mentors works in that area, in that geography.
Yeah.
And so it's cool, when you work for a conservation organization, you get to drive by the side of the road and pull off and you see the sign, and our name is, usually way too small in the corner of a sign somewhere. Right. And you're like, hey, I know the guy that did that.
Right. Exactly. That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. So that's something I'm pretty excited about. And it's just like, it's a little bit at a time. Sometimes it feels, I would say, sometimes it's hard, this job, because you feel like there's not enough time to do enough work fast enough, to address the concerns that everybody has. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how political you want to get on the show, or like whatever, talk about climate change and the radical emergency that it is. But,
no matter
what, you come to this job to do something, and sometimes it feels like you're doing like 100th of what you can, but not always, so that should be fun. If you're in Brooklyn, Laura, I'll make sure that you know about it. You should come up and check it out. We'll probably have a little party at some point. So go out hiking together. Have you ever been on the trail, Laura?
I have not. I have a book publishing company, and we have an author right now who is in his 70s, and him and his brother hiked it in their 70s as like a learning experience. And cool. I don't think it was intended. Like his brother's wife died, and he was just like traumatized, and so they needed to big. So they did this together, and it ended up being this great bonding experience. And like that's all full of. He's got 7,000 pictures from the trip, but not all 7,000 are making it into the book. But so I'm learning a lot about it right now.
That's so cool. Did you say what parts of it did they do?
I don't know. All of it, lots of it. I have no idea. It's like super long. I'm not the editor.
Cool. So No. Yeah, that's all right. Well, it's super cool. There are a couple folks at TPL that are what they call through hikers.
Yeah.
Did the whole thing, and plenty of folks that have done it in sections. And I don't know if that's in my future or not, but
I'll definitely share it with you. It's a wild story. I mean, one of them, the author, he broke his hip before he finished, and he did like 3 days of it with a broken hip.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. That is crazy.
Golly. Yeah. I mean,
it's veteran. So, it's a cool story.
Yeah.
That is a cool story.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. It's a beautiful trail. And I love that we're spending some time on it. It's like Laura and I are totally going to talk about this later, whether she wants to or not. So, because like I say, I grew up there, and like the Peaks of Otter is what I was close to. And that's like a secret gem for me. It's like you go to Sharp Top in September, October, and you hike up a pretty tough trail. But the top is, you get to look over at Bedford Valley. It's beautiful. Beautiful.
That is amazing. While we're talking about the AT, it's amazing. And it ends, like I said, in Katahdin. And one of the most amazing things we're doing right now, and it would be remiss if I left this podcast without mentioning it, is that, as I mentioned earlier in sort of a garbled way, we've been working with the Penobscot Nation and just announced last November a plan for the return of almost 32,000 acres around Mount Katahdin to the nation.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was stolen from the Penobscot in the 19th century, as we all know. We'll get into that. This is going to represent, and I'm going to read this, but it's amazing. It will represent the largest land return between a U.S.-based nonprofit and a tribal nation in the history of the country.
Wow.
And it's all going to be centered on indigenous self-determination for the management of the land.
Yeah.
So what's really fascinating about that is when you get into this gig, you come into it with this high-minded, like, hey, we're going to save the world. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And of course, that motivates what you do every day. But then you figure out, like, okay, how are we actually going to do it?
Yeah.
And who's going to like unlock the fence like after the snow season? And like, do you know what I mean? Like it gets down to like the most basic stuff. And of course, especially when you're dealing with the nations, land itself is literally sacred, right? So management is a very important notion. And I won't pretend to speak to that with any expertise. But what's fascinating about this is that it involves not just the nations, not just DPL, but a bunch of government agencies, regulatory schema, laws, right? All these things play into it. And so I just wanted to say that the right way, which is that, the project's going to open up new access to the Katahdin Woods and the Waters National Monument. So folks up in Maine will have heard about this by now, but I think that's like, in terms of our work on the Appalachian Trail, that I think that's like a really great capstone to that conversation, and an exciting time for us to be talking about it.
It's really awesome.
Cool. Thanks for letting me do that.
Cool. Yeah, of course. It's incredible. I mean, that has to be quite challenging, and I can only imagine how difficult and long that process was. But it's very, very cool.
You can have one of my colleagues on who did that. I assure you, she will agree with what you just said. but Betsy's amazing up in our main program. So yeah.
I mean, it's like the job is all. Sometimes it's the complex thing when you do get to that finish line, it's almost a relief more than anything else, no matter how it turns out. So that's really cool to hear.
That's for sure.
Really well. So I'm really glad to hear that. I love that you worked on that, and that's really fun.
Yeah.
And we do this thing on the show where we like to talk about projects, people doing their job, being out in the field, and relating that experience to our audience. We call it, field notes. It's our field notes section.
Sure.
So, but as I say, it's a good segue to like our segment we call Field Notes, which is when we encourage our guests to talk about memorable moments in the field. And we always ask this question before people come on, and you said to ask you about mules. So please tell us a mule story.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I can't reveal the names and dates and places because I want to protect the identities of the innocent. But the mule's name was Willie.
Yeah.
He won't mind. Willie won't mind.
Right.
But it's one of those things. Let's just say we were really deep into a project and had spent untold amounts of money and time on it and put our reputation into it, only to get a call from our future land steward, our future land manager, our government partner to say, hey, Fran, how you doing? Looking forward to getting this project done. Just wanted to know if you were aware that there's a horse on your property. The fact is, right, like, it's not like the property's right next to me. So there's only one of me, and I don't yet own a helicopter. So I had to go up and discover that, in fact, it was not a horse, it was a mule. And that until we got him off of our property, we weren't going to be able to finish the deal, basically. And so I really don't know if I should be saying this, but it's so darn funny. We literally had to arrange to have the thing like shooed off of our property back onto another one. Right. And I thought I was going to lose my job. We didn't know whose it was. We didn't know what we were going to do with it. What are you going to do? Am I going to adopt a mule? I don't know. Right. And this is the stuff that, like, at one point it was sort of like, well, Fran, good job, bud. You got to figure it out. So I was calling animal rescues and animal control and the sheriff. And as it turns out, it was just fine. And a neighbor owned it, and they eventually did the right thing, and it was all good. But I definitely would. It's actually not the only mule that I've met in my travels. But it was a good one, and it was a learning experience for sure, and not something that I would have been able to do as a broker in Manhattan. Right.
We'll just add mule wrangler to your title there. That's what.
For sure. Yeah, it's like a Western.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the other things we love to do on the show is just have people, we want to get to know you a little bit too. So, we all do this environmental work. We all have passions and wants, needs, and desires. But what we do outside of that is also really important, right? So your personal hobbies. So I'm going to ask about golf, which is the most brutal sport in the world to play, except, and I love it when you do well, it's your fault. You have the power, right? When you don't do well, it's everything else's fault, right? Like the weather, the wind blew. That's why my ball sliced. It's not me. It couldn't have been. But when you hit that for a perfect putt or that perfect drive, it's all you. So I don't know. What is your relationship with golf? How do you see it?
Yeah. Well, becoming a parent of two young children has made me a more patient golfer for sure.
Yeah.
It's a difficult sport. It's really mental. I'm sorry. I heard you right. You do play, Nic?
I have a lot.
Or you have.
And like my feet keep breaking. So it's kind of one of those things where I don't do it as much. Yeah. It's just the torque on it. I don't know how to hit the ball without hitting it as hard as possible. And that's my problem, So.
Well, this could become a golf podcast really fast. And it also accesses one of my other personal hobbies, which is personal fitness. So if your feet keep breaking, man, we got to talk about that. Yeah. Lord, do we have to get this guy orthotics? He said orthotics earlier without me saying anything. He went right to orthotics.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a thing.
I don't get it. I don't get out as much as I'd like to. I used to play a lot more before I had kids. I love to do it with friends.
Oh yeah.
It's just it's social. It is definitely a test of your mental fortitude, because it's something that you're not even if you have been practicing, it's just something you're not particularly good at. And I think that's actually been for me, it's been the hardest and also the most rewarding thing about golf, which is, I'm sure that there's a lot of analogies here, but I don't know that there's many better ones, analogous activities. But it's to understand how good the good shots that you make were, and to get over how normal the bad shots you make are.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
That's
right?
Exactly right. It's the luckiest thing I ever got to do was play at Pinehurst.
Whoa, cool.
Which was super cool. It was an
Laura, do you know how cool that is? Do you know how cool Pinehurst is? We were,
No, I know. Right. She's so mad at me right now. No, but no, it was
like a nursing home.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, kind of. Anyways, yeah, I shouldn't put that out in the air, but it was beautiful. I played the worst I've ever played my whole life until the last drive. And then on the last hole, I hit a perfect shot. And that's what I try to remember, because it was, it's a hard course. It was not easy by any means, but that last hole I was really good on. And so I just hold down to that,
It's that one shot that keeps you coming back for sure.
Yes, it is.
For sure.
It really is.
Yep. No, that's it.
Yeah.
I used to be better than I am now. And for a while it was really frustrating because I remember what it was when I could string together a few good shots or whatever. It's not really like riding a bike at all.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm bad enough again that when I hit a really good shot, it keeps me happy for a while and I'm laughing,
Yeah, exactly.
I hope it's a good time to be asking that question because it's just about to start to be golf weather.
Yeah. I was about to say the same. Yeah. It's a beautiful time.
Yeah.
All right, Laura, I'm done.
Something that I can relate more to is music. So you play in a band as well?
I try to. Oh man, my friends hear this, they're gonna just absolutely roast me. Yeah, I'm in a dad band.
There we go.
And lucky enough to be able to play.
Yeah,
we had this really cool thing in Irvington where I live, where some neighbors of mine of ours started about 10 years ago to play on the front porch of their houses. We live in a little village, and so they started. One year they were like, hey, let's dress. Everybody likes to go in Halloween. It's a nice little place and it's fun. It's just right next to where Washington Irving grew up. He's the guy that wrote The Legends of Sleepy Hollow about the Headless Horseman.
Oh, yeah.
So it's always been a big thing. And so about 10 years ago, they said, hey, let's dress up for Halloween. We're musicians. They were similar, in a dad band or played part. A couple of them were professionals. Let's dress up as the Clash. And they said, wouldn't it be cool if we actually played as the Clash? And so they did, and it was a big hit. So it started out as one band, and now there's 7 or 8 bands that play around town. And so I've been playing with that. Just did it again for the first time in a while last year with some friends and played country music. But I've been playing blues guitar since I was about 15 and just love it. And was lucky enough to have some great teachers. And I was actually just at the guitar store at lunch break, walking around, getting some fresh air before this thing. So I do it whenever I can.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Fun. It's a lot of fun. Lord, do you play? Do you sing? Do you like to music? Do you just
no, I do not sing. But I've been playing cello for majority of my life. Mm-hmm. I just haven't played consistently enough to be all that good. But and I also do play guitar a little bit.
Did you say you play cello?
Yeah.
Oh, cool! I love that instrument. Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, I do. I love the instrument. If nothing else, I got a fond appreciation for the instrument.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my little girl Maggie, my eldest, just got has been playing piano for several years now.
Mm-hmm.
Piano's nice because you just press the key and the notes it's the right note. You know what I mean? It's really easy to be flat and sharp with cello. So I think it's been, as a somewhat experienced musician, I don't mean to say I'm some kind of special pro, but I can play. I'm glad that I didn't have my daughter playing cello. That sounds a little mean, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's gotten really good, man. I used to play cello when I was a kid. I loved it a little bit. That's awesome.
I mean, I played trumpet when I was a kid, and it's the same problem, right? It is so easy to hit the wrong note.
Mm-hmm.
And that, those first years you're learning how to play, it is a moose dying. It's just...
It's brutal, man.
It's brutal. I don't know how my parents put up with it, honestly. So, yeah.
My wife calls me a highly sensitive person. She calls me a lot of names, but when it comes to sound, I'm highly sensitive for sure.
Yeah. I don't know if people would probably say the same about me, honestly. So, no comment.
Yeah.
Well, this has been tons of fun, actually, and the time's gone by really fast. But is there anything else you want to talk about that we didn't get to before we let you go?
No, this really did go by fast. I didn't realize that. No, I think that it was a good conversation. I felt like I was talking the whole time. So thanks for being so gracious and welcoming. It's been really fun. Unless you guys have more questions about the career path side, I feel like I've gotten a chance to talk about TPL and what it does. And I would be more than happy to, field any inquiries from folks in the future and stuff like that. You know what I mean? If we get around to that, but no, this has been really fun. I really appreciate it.
So yeah, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Sure. So our offices are in Manhattan. So I'm around and always welcome to reach out to my LinkedIn profile, which I can share with you guys. My email is francis.o'shea@tpl.org. And happy to continue the conversation offline.
Very cool. Thank you so much for joining, Fran. We really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Laura and Nick. I appreciate that. And I had a great time too.
That's our show. Thank you, Francis, for joining us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.
See you, everybody.